Hello and welcome to this lecture for professional experience. And we have a beautiful focus on wellbeing. So my name is Professor Narelle Lemon. I'm a Vice Chancellor, Professoriate Research Fellow and Professor in Education at ECU. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with me, I joined colleagues here from Melbourne in October 2023. So a new team member and very much excited to be working with the professional experience team across all our campuses and on many other projects as well in regards to all things wellbeing and self-care. So I'm glad to be sharing some of these insights with you today. So before I progress any further, I would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of lands across Australia, their elders, ancestors and cultures, heritage, and recognise the continuing sovereignties of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I acknowledge that many of us today are joining from different lands, and I'm glad that you are here. So we're going to be talking about wellbeing and self-care today, particularly from the perspective of being teachers and future teachers. And so I just wanted to establish that as we talk about this, that we really want to celebrate different perspectives and acknowledge that everybody experiences well-being and self-care in different ways. And so with this, we very much come from a mutual respect, a right to pass in terms of engaging how and when you want to, non-judgment, deep listening, and courage and curiosity. I'm going to talk about a framework today that helps us talk about our well-being and self-care, but I just want to be careful to make sure that this is not assumed as counselling or treatment or advice that's specific to you, and that your personal needs and professional lived experiences are very, very different, and we very much acknowledge that. We're building what we call a wellbeing literacy today, so an intentional language of how we talk about wellbeing. But with that, we also need to acknowledge who you are, where you're at, and what your lived experience is as well. So please be gentle with yourself. Please take what is relevant for you right now, knowing that you can come back and re-explore, re-navigate these ideas as well. So as you listen to this lecture, I'm planting some seeds for you to consider, an invitation. So what does this activity bring to me? So I'm talking activity in terms of this moment in time of listening to this lecture, some different ideas. What might be helpful? And how can I see it in action? So before we move any further, I just wanted to share a little bit of a background from me to give you the relevance of my thinking and where it comes from. So I'm what they call an interdisciplinary scholar. I have an arts background, a trained classical musician and visual arts. I am a positive psychology coach, and I'm an educator with experience across early years, primary, secondary, higher education, museums, galleries, community settings. So a lot of diverse experiences. I've used my teaching to work in event management. And, I've spent a lot of my career in the arts. The arts are a beautiful way to interrogate ideas, communicate, express different things. But something was sitting there in regards to well-being for me personally within the first 6 months of teaching. My first year of teaching, I became quite ill, and I burnt out quite significantly. And I didn't know how to talk about my well-being. I actually didn't really know what was going on. And I certainly didn't have any resources to connect with, to explore. I watched and binge watched a lot of TV. I slept a lot. But as I soon realized, that was not going to move me forward for my health and my care personally and professionally. And so, fast forward a few years on, I burnt out again. And it started to go, I just don't want to have this feeling anymore. This is wrong. Why is this occurring? And so that took me on a journey to really explore how we talk about well-being, how we talk about self-care. And I initially entered through mindfulness. And I was really, quite attracted to that idea of being present, pausing, slowing down. And that was so unfamiliar to me. I was working full time as a teacher. I was still performing as a musician. I was burning the candle at both ends, as they say. I was still socializing. I was living in Melbourne, but I had grown up in regional. So I was still traveling multiple hours one way, multiple times a week. And it just started to take a toll. And I really didn't know how to address that. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know what resources I had. So that took me on a journey, and a journey to my passion of self-care and well-being, and translating the well-being science into everyday practice. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to share a strategy here. And it's a think, pair, share strategy, which for those watching this recording right now will be going, how do I possibly do this? Because I'm most likely by myself. So, what I want to do is to plant the seed of this activity, to give you time to sort of prepare for it. And then in the workshop, you'll be able to unpack this. But the reason I'm integrating it now and planting this seed now for you is because I really want you to think about this. So, professional experiences are a central part of learning to teach. And it's where we really marry together the theory with the practice in a supportive way where we can unpack all the nuances. We can learn from each other. We can trial. We learn from making mistakes. We fail forward. We celebrate our growth. Professional experience is intense. It's the first insight for many of the complexity of what it means to be a teacher. It's also one of those first moments where we realize well-being as a teacher is absolutely central, not only for ourselves, but because of our influence on the young people that we're working with, our fellow colleagues, the school environment, the bigger environment of the school and how it fits into the community, and so on. So there's a big flow and effect. If you are not well as a teacher, if you are not caring for yourself, this will impact the classroom environment. It will impact the young people, your colleagues, the community that you're working with. Research tells us this time and time and time again. So well-being is really one of those number one priorities that has a flow and effect for the cognitive, social, relational of those that we're working for. So professional experience is one of those first moments where we start to really realize that, on top of what it means to be a teacher and all those moving parts in terms of pedagogy, curriculum, developing relationships, all those layers that are there. So what I'm asking you to do is to think professional experience are intense. They require you as a pre-service teacher to immerse yourselves as you develop your skills in teaching. So I'm going to ask you to think, and I'm going to pause this video to give you time to do this so you capture it. So think about, and list what you have to juggle as you move into professional experience. Think about your personal life, your university commitments, your well-being, your relationships, your responsibility, work, travel. There's many, 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 many layers. What's your current reality? What do you need to think about? All those moving parts that you need to juggle. I want you to think, and then I really want you to capture a big list of those elements. And I'm going to pause now as you consider this and take a moment to capture this before we progress any further. Okay, welcome back from your sharing. So, you have shared with yourself, you've captured this, and when you go into the workshop, you'll be able to unpack this further. So, let's unpack the theory. So, first of all, I want to explore for you some terminology that really influences the framework that I'm going to share with you today. So, from a positive psychology perspective, we think about what's good in life, being authentic, what satisfies us, and what enables us to be our best life right now. Now, positive psychology is not about just being positive or acknowledging the positive. It actually acknowledges the complexity of life and those natural ups and downs, and that there is ups and downs. What it is in those moments, we think about what is good. And even in those moments where it's pretty average, there is capacity to find something good, even the smallest. And how do we take that and build that and grow that? When we talk about well-being, we're talking about our ability to feel good and function effectively. And we think about that in all the different realms in terms of emotions, our mental, our relational, our social, our spiritual, our physical, our cognitive well-being. And then self-care. It's a juicy word that often brings up many different things for us, but self-care is really thinking about those proactive actions that we take to care for ourselves, to protect ourselves, and to maintain ourselves. It's very much about the self being a part of a bigger picture that moves beyond selfishness and the commercialized ideas of self-care. And I'll unpack this a little bit further as we move through the lecture. But some key words there and key concepts that influence what we're talking about today. So self-care is the big aspect of our focus. And on the screen here, we can see so many different kinds of reflections of self-care where it is acknowledged as it's difficult, it's confusing. We've been indoctrinated with different ideals of it. We've been taught that it's selfish. We've been taught various different versions of what it might be, influenced by commercialization. You know, often it's not uncommon to think about self-care as that it is sitting in beautiful, expensive yoga clothes in the lotus position with a beautiful coastal backdrop. It's a massage, a bath, doing your nails, going for a day spa. Now, those aspects can be a part of self-care, but they certainly are not the crucial part of self-care, nor are they anything that you can do in the everyday that helps you for your personal and professional. They may help sometimes when I'm incredibly tired, exhausted, and I'm taking some time out. I will go for a massage because I acknowledge I'm holding the tension in my body. That massage is a form of self-care in that moment because I'm tuning in to my body. But it's certainly not something that I would do in the professional setting. And so there's a difference between the personal and the professional settings. And as you start to explore about what this might be for you, you can start to think through those differences, where there's similarities and what that can look like across different contexts. So we're interrupting self-care as having a spa and these commercialized notions of this is what it's like. We're saying that some of these things are helpful. Sometimes I burn candles of an evening at dinner with a beautiful scent. It's moody. It's a relaxing notion, but it's not something that we would do all day, every day. Of course, if you Google self-care, you find all sorts of memes, graphics, motivational inspiration. Some are helpful, some are not quite. But what we want to start to think about is the nitty-gritties of self-care. So self-care is very much about intentional actions. So it's proactive actions. You draw on diverse areas of wellbeing science. The saying one thing is not going to sustain you. We need a multiple different strategies, practices, or what I call tools. Self-care wellbeing is definitely influenced by context. It changes across context. It changes across time. It changes across different combinations of people. It can look and feel different every day. And it very much is relational. So we care for ourselves in order to care for others. And when we think about that as teachers and future teachers, that's really critical. So self-care is relational. We care for ourselves in order to care for others. And of course, it's relational because our act of self-care, some of our strategies or tools involve other people. Other people motivate us, they inspire us, they support us. So that relationality is very much critical there, interrupting that notion of selfishness. There's a menu of items. It's not a checklist. We acknowledge that there's a framework that we can set up that enables us to connect with different tools, different strategies, acknowledging context, time, variables, and that sometimes something might work the same as a friend, but other times it might not. So this is my definition of self-care. Self-care is anything you do proactively that helps you develop, protect, maintain, and improve health, well-being, or wellness. It is about meeting yourself each day, learning who you really are, and continuing to be present with your needs to help you to be the best version of yourself today. It's a process of self-discovery. It's not perfectionism or comparing yourself to others. So let's unpack a bit about self-care. So self-care is proactive. We grow, maintain, and protect your wellness, well-being, and health. So there's the grow part, there's the maintain, and there's the protect. Three critical elements there that we don't often think about. The self in self-care is about the self-love, the self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-regulation. Automatically, that connection to self has been interrupted for that selfishness. It's relational, as we spoke about a little bit earlier. We care for ourselves in order to care for others, incredibly important as educators. It's also relational because we need others for support, motivation, actual action. And we also think about self-care as a strength. And we will do a lot of work about strengths in professional experience throughout your degree. And we think about strengths in that they energize us, we perform them well, and when we perform them, we do them well. So if we think about self-care as a strength, if we're tuning into tools, strategies, or practices that really excite us, energize us, make us feel good, we will naturally be our best self. We will be performing well. We will be in flow. We will be in the moment. We will be just enjoying ourselves, really satisfied with how we're engaging with the world, the activity, and others. So that's a new way to think about self-care. And with self-care, we have growth and fixed mindset together. Now, we're often taught that it's either or and other variations of mindsets, but let's think about it this way. If we have a fixed mindset for our strengths of self-care, that means we're fixed on those tools or strategies we know that work well, that energize us, we perform well. So, for example, a fixed mindset for me and my self-care professionally is that I know that I, in the morning, need to get up and have a routine of movement, green tea, a mindful moment, being organized. Those 4 things are non-negotiable for me in my morning routine. I have a fixed mindset with those strategies. I have a fixed mindset that I must eat something at lunchtime and it needs to have a nutritionist value, usually with protein and vegetables. If I skip lunch or I eat something not so healthy, I know that that's going to impact me for the afternoon with my energy, how my brain works. I know I have a fixed mindset that I can't say yes to everything and that I need to plan my time and have boundaries. I've had to learn to say no, no, not now, or no, not quite that element, but I could be involved with something. I've learned that from a fixed mindset perspective that I love photography. I love being creative and I need that as a part of my everyday. So the background that I have here is a part of my self-care. It's a photograph that I have taken at Fitzgerald River National Park when I was hiking and down there camping. And every time I look at it, I remember that moment when we were starting to climb up the mountain. I remember the awe that I had seeing those beautiful pops of red and yellow, the green with the blue skies, the view that we saw when we turned around, the beautiful act of sharing it as my backdrop for when I connect in virtually for something like this or for meetings. So that's a fixed mindset of a strategy or a tool as a part of my well-being. From a growth perspective, I have a growth mindset and I'm always thinking, learning, exploring what other tools that I can add to my toolbox that may help me that I don't know about yet, or I learned about a while ago, but it wasn't right for me right then. And I've kind of put it to the side and something's happened and it's come back to my attention and I'm interested to explore it. So I have a growth mindset is I'm always adding to and exploring because my context and my influence and time changes and I need to grow. I need to continually grow while maintaining what my self-care will look like. So we talk about a toolbox approach, that we have a variety of different tools from different areas of wellbeing science, and I'm going to unpack what that might look like just in a moment. And we have the how, which is the 5 dimensions of self-care. my model, that of how we put it into practice. So there's mindful awareness, self-compassion, habits, time, and empowerment. And we'll unpack each of those as we move forward. So I think about self-care like filling our cup. And we see the meme so often on social media where we have a cup half full, half empty. Actually, self-care is overfilling that cup. And you are giving to others with what is hanging in that saucer or is overspilled from the saucer. It's quite a different metaphor. So you fill your cup with all your tools, your strategies, your fixed mindset, your growth mindset of how you approach your well-being. And then you give to others from what is overpouring. Because we can't function when we're giving with our cup half empty, empty. So it's a nice rethinking of this. Okay, so let's put this theory into a bit of practice. So I mentioned early on that I had experienced illness, connection with burnout that really started to make me think about how I talk about well-being and what that might look like, feel like, and just realizing I had no language. So when I was in that stage, I had the couch, TV viewing, I slept, texting with friends, and I would walk. But usually it wasn't to go for a walk because I wanted to move my body. It was because I was usually combining it with food shopping. This is all that I did to care for me. It's not really sustainable. It is not sustainable. So now, with a knowledge about self-care and well-being science, I have an extraordinary amount of different strategies and tools that I use, and it continues to grow. So there's things like cooking new recipes, there's self-compassion mantra, there's embracing a strength of curiosity. Yes, I watch TV, but I don't watch a lot. And when I do, we're usually watching it as a household. So then there's a social aspect to it. I love to volunteer and mentor and give back. There's auditing my time and really thinking through how I use it. There's connecting to my why. I love hiking, camping, walking on the beach, things like a soothing touch, podcast listening, social conversation, making better food choices. Lots of different strategies that I now engage with that I know that boost me and help me care for me. So I mentioned before that we think about self-care as a toolbox theory, and we're really thinking through this in terms of multiple tools. So you could literally think of a toolbox or maybe a tool belt. And in that box, on that belt, maybe it's a drawer, there is quite a number of different tools that are there, and each tool has a different purpose. But sometimes we might have 3 versions of the same tool. So we might have 3 versions of what might be, we could think of as perhaps a hammer, and that hammer could represent a meditation. And 3 different types of meditation. One is short and sharp. One is about self-compassion and tuning into me. Another one may be about relaxation and a body scan, tuning into the body. So what we want to do is we want to have so many different tools. We have our go-to favorite tools. We have tools that we're collecting, and that those tools need to come from diverse areas of wellbeing science. So not one strategy works all the time, nor for everybody. So this is why we have a collection of tools. And for each of us, our tools and approaches will vary. They'll depend on the person, the situation, individual and collective states of well-being. So that's where the context really influences it. Outcomes we want to achieve, cultural influences, spiritual influences, time and motivation. There's a whole heap of other things as well. So this is why well-being and self-care is so complex. How we're well at home versus how we're well with our closest friend versus how we're well in a situation where you're by yourself or you're in the classroom or with your colleagues that you know well, the colleagues you don't know well, when you're out in public. You know, there's so many different variables, and what you do and what you engage with and how you feel can change. It's a bit like those moments where you can be surrounded by hundreds of people but feel really alone. Or you could be surrounded by hundreds of people and feel really connected. You could be at a table with a group of people where you feel like you belong and connect, and other moments not. So context can change, and that influences how we feel about self and how we care about ourselves. So when we think about tools, we're going to select a tool, have a go, reflect, tweak or tinker with it, and build your toolbox for self-care. So we're constantly looking for this cycle of what's going to work for me, what's possible, and collecting those tools as we go along. Some we might add, others we might not. Some we might add and go, that's not right for me right now, but I'm interested to see. Some might be tools that you collect from watching other people doing things. It might be from a professional development, it might be from conversations, it might be from professional support, all different ways that we can collect them. So I've mentioned a few times that we need tools from diverse areas of wellbeing science. So there's many different frameworks we can connect to, but one of my most favorite frameworks to think about is PERMA-H. And so PERMA has come from positive psychology. It's from the founding father, Martin Seligman, who conceptualized this for our subjective well-being. Since then, it's been developed and grown. There's a whole heap of different other versions. There's PERMA Plus, there's PERMA H, there's a few others floating around as well. I really love PERMA H because it's a nice way to connect into those diverse areas, and it's a stepping stone. It's a beautiful introductory flow point into thinking about diverse areas of wellbeing science. So the P stands for positive emotions. We acknowledge there's ups and downs, but when we engage with positive emotions, they boost us. And positive emotions are contagious. And it's important to try and engage with these more than negative, because our brain naturally shifts to the negative, and we want to interrupt that. And this is not in a fake way or a glossy stream over things way. We acknowledge that there's ups and downs. But how can we engage more with positive emotions such as gratitude, appreciation, awe, kindness, compassion, laughter? There's so many. E stands for engagement. So it's the regular development of our strengths. So you can see why we're going to be working with strengths a lot in professional experience, because these are the things we're good at and we enjoy doing. And when we do them, we feel so good. It helps us to engage with what's around us, who's around us, our context. R stands for relationships. So the creation of authentic, energizing, enriching connections. Relationships are so critical, and it's the relationship with self as much as it is relationship with others and all the complexities of what that looks like. M stands for meaning, so that connection to your why, your purpose, having a meaning in life. A connects to accomplishments. So that ability to do things that matter most to you, and you're setting achievable and meaningful goals. And these can be intrinsic and extrinsic. They can be small, they can be large. Accomplishments is not just about awards or recognition publicly. It's also about those personal, yeah, just did that, I'm so proud of myself moments. It's the high fives, it's the shaking of pom-poms for other people as well. And H stands for health. So this is about eating well, moving, hydration, sleeping, all those key aspects. And it's really thinking about sustaining and developing those sustained habits that help you with those basic health aspects. So PERMA H is a beautiful way to connect to the wellbeing science, to think about that diversity that we need when we're being proactive with ourself in order to care for us, that then cares for others. So if I looked at all those different strategies that I shared for you pouring out of my teapot, and if I classified them across PERMA H, this is what it would look like. So you can see I'm drawing from a whole heap of different strategies from across those 6 different areas, the diverse areas of wellbeing science. You can see some of them I tilt towards being more heavily engaging with, and others less so, but there is the diversity there. And this will change and develop and grow as I do as a person, but also my professional context changes and develops. Those who are in my life does. I've just relocated from Melbourne to Perth. That was a big contextual change. So a lot of these self-care tools worked and others did not, and I had to find new ones as I changed and settled into my new context. So I'm going to invite you now to think about, what do you do in your everyday to care for you? What is your toolbox? And I want to build it together. And the way that I'm talking about this and building it together is I'm going to ask you to individually contribute to a community Padlet site. And you can do this anonymously, and I encourage it to be anonymous, but if you want your name, that is totally fine as well. But I want you to share a photograph or a video or an audio that you have on your phone or on your iPad, on your device, that represents an everyday act of self-care, an everyday act of how you care for you. Now, this, for 2 purposes. Number 1, starts for you to identify something that you've captured, something that you've documented, that you can really identify as an area of self-care. And you can think through, what does it mean? What does that bring out for me across any of those diverse areas of self-care and the wellbeing science that we've talked about? And then by sharing it, we're sharing to a community, so you can potentially build your tools. You are seeing other people's tools. There'll be affirmations of, oh, I do that too. I hadn't thought about that. They'll be like, oh, that's new. And so we're creating this collective toolbox as well. So let's connect with these steps. So we're thinking about being a citizen wellbeing scientist here. We're playing on that notion of citizen scientist, where we're contributing as citizens of the world to science. You are a citizen of the world contributing to wellbeing science. And you've now started that beginning idea of wellbeing science and what it is across our PERMA H. And you're contributing to, what does the everyday self-care look, feel, and sound like? What's a tool that you have that's represented visually or with moving image or audio? And we're going to share it. What we're doing is we're documenting real life self-care. We're sharing our own individual tool in order to form a community of tools that we can draw on, we can come back to, we can share multiple times, we can invite other people to share to, and we're building this massive collective toolbox that gives us ideas. So if we're in a moment of a dip and hardship, we might come and have a look here and see and remind ourselves of what might help us. And we're starting to really unpack that language of, what does everyday self-care look like? So what I want you to do is reflect on your self-care practices. I want you to go through your phone or your pad or your other device and find something that documents your self-care. And then when you're ready, I want you to upload it. and you're going to upload it to a Padlet site. And you can find this Padlet site by scanning this QR code. So we're going to pause now as you do this action for everyday self-care. Enjoy being a citizen wellbeing scientist. So welcome back and thank you for sharing. So as our Padlet grows, we start to see various different actions from diverse areas of wellbeing science demonstrating, documenting our self-care. It's so exciting as you contribute your tool and our whole toolbox also starts to grow. This is a resource that you can use, you can contribute in an ongoing way, you can share out with others, invite others to contribute. This is what it means to be a citizen wellbeing science as you think about your self-care and the self-care of others, and particularly your professional and personal self-care boundaries and what that might look like. So we've talked about wellbeing science, the definitions of self-care. We're starting to think about it in terms of those practicalities. You've learned about PERMA-H. Now let's quickly connect into the 5 dimensions of self-care. So we want to think about these, that they can occur in any order. They're interconnected. There's not a particular weighting with them, but they are all a part of the how. So when we think about self-awareness, we are thinking about that mindful awareness where we pause and we're present and we're tuning into what do we need right now. This is the dimension that helps us think about and identify the tool that we need to engage with. We think about self-compassion in terms of how do we treat ourselves like a friend. We treat friends in a time of need incredibly well. We listen, we're supportive, we're encouraging. But if we think about how we treat ourselves when we're a little bit stressed, exhausted, not feeling that great, we can often be quite critical. So we're really starting to think about that self-compassion. How do we treat ourselves like a friend? When I think about those habits, so those small choices that you make every day, that when you repeat them over and over again, make a massive impact. So that's where walking every day, for example, in the morning, before you realize it, you can go longer, you can go a further distance. Your body is feeling different. You hold yourself in a different way. Muscles are feeling great and loose. You miss it when you stop doing it. So it's just one little example. Time. Time is a big one with self-care because that is a huge variable. It can go from little micro moments of 5 seconds right through to anything that could go for a whole day or multiple days. Think of a holiday that might go for multiple days. That's an act of self-care. It can happen yearly. It could happen monthly. It might happen once a week. It could happen daily. It could happen multiple times a day. So many different variables in terms of time with our self-care that helps us engage with those different tools that we have. And then we want to think about empowerment. And I think about this also in terms of agency and choice. When we have these, what are the tools that we're using to help us be our best self? What choices do we make to care for ourselves in these moments? So it's very, very complex. And a short, sharp introduction to those 5 dimensions. And I'm sure over time, we will have a chance to unpack throughout your workshop, but also your degree as well. Now, I want to leave you with some inspiration. And I want you to think about how you're going to look out for you. And this is where that the self-love, the self-compassion, the self-awareness comes into play. So as you're growing as a teacher, becoming a teacher, being a teacher, thinking about your well-being and your self-care, success looks different on different days. And it can be heavily influenced by different contexts, different settings. And it might be setting personal and professional intentions and landing all of them for that day. Or maybe you might be able to exercise and catch up with friends, and it might be a little bit different. But you're thinking through, what are those intentions? What might that be? It might be looking out for yourself, might be that simply you just got out of bed and showed up. So every day is different. And every moment is different, and we can reset in every moment. So looking out for you might be also just making it tomorrow. So I want to acknowledge there's tough times, but you show up for yourself, and you're reminded to yourself that you've got this, and that each moment is new, and you can reset. You can reset right in the moment. You can reset the second half of the day. You could reset tomorrow. You could reset next week. There's always ways to reset, to think about you, how you care for you, and what your well-being looks like in that personal and professional context. So as you think about your well-being, we've done a lot today in terms of concepts and thinking. And this is an ongoing dialogue, and we've done a big dump of different ideas of how to think about it. And it's now your beautiful opportunity to consider this and to take on board what helps you for right now, but to revisit and rethink and develop that language, that mindful intention of how you talk about and comprehend well-being for yourself and for others. And you have a shared language now that you can start to use with each other to explore that and that interruption of what self-care can and be look like. What does that mean for your wellness and your health and well-being? And what does that look like for you as an individual, but then also as a teacher? Enjoy the exploration through your workshop, and so lovely to be with you. Look forward to seeing you soon.